Hi, my name is Winslay, and welcome to my top 10 tips for playing around with the new content that's coming out with the First Contact story pack and the free 3.7 Canis Minor update for Stellaris. Big thanks to Paradox Interactive for sharing a free key with me. That was really nice getting that a few days before the main release, so I could play around with the content, and come up with what I think is some pretty interesting nuanced tips for both veteran and new players alike. For people who would like to use timestamps to jump between any of the tips, to say you find one less interesting, you want to see some of the other tips I have for you, please feel free to use the timestamps below. That's what they're there for. So yeah, without further ado, let's jump into our first tip. So I really like the new options that we're going to get available to us in our civics and I think origins that come with the new content. Things like payback and fear the dark are interesting, but I think one of the more interesting ones for me, one that I'm going to be spending more time playing around with, is the new low tech options that you have. I believe if I go to this one, I can find something about explorers in here. Yes, eager explorers is kind of like the generic one for your typical empires. There's one for hive minds, one for MegaCorp, and I believe a different one for machine intelligences. So these guys start without the ability to use hyperlane travel. It's a bit different than your typical empire, but they also have reduced infrastructure and starting pops, which is makes it a pretty challenging start for everybody. The big advantage that they get is that they're going to have these extra exploration vessels, which means they should be able to um, survey the things around them and expand a little bit quicker, but it's an interesting trade-off, and there's definitely some like weird things I was experiencing when I was trying to do automatic exploration and surveying that makes it so that they are a little bit more micromanagey. But I really feel like that the hive one is going to be a pretty popular option. The uh, you know, that's pre-hyperlane travel starts, the low tech starts. The hive mind one is called Stargazers, and it gives you extra habitability. I think, yeah, my picture may be covering the description here a little bit, but yeah, it doesn't actually show up what the Stargazer trait gives right here. It gives like plus habitability and resettlement, and I think one other thing that makes it just so hives are going to be able to grow just that much quicker at the very beginning of the game. They also are going to have reduced star base influence costs, which is massive. I really like a lot of these modifiers. Some sound better than others, but for particular strategies, so if you lean into it, it's probably going to be pretty good in the long run anyways. It's probably not a meta build because the missing 10 fewer pops at the beginning of the game is quite a significant disadvantage, but one that I think you can do some interesting things with if like you maybe have other players you can rely on. My next tip is to not ignore detection boosting research. What the reason is there's a lot of really great new mechanics that involve cloaking, and if you don't have detection, people are just going to be able to like manipulate your empire with much less ease. There's multiple tiers of detection, so just a little bit of research can an investment can deter people from going after you and going after somebody else who hasn't invested anything into detection. So for example, this starbase right here, I've gone ahead and placed these detection arrays on, and when I first started playing around with these mechanics, I was wondering where the detection arrays are, why I couldn't build them. They're underneath a technology in the physics research. So I believe this is probably the easiest way to get detection. And you do that by going into the physics research and focusing down. I think you want the cloaking first, and then the detection array is somewhere in this list as another rare technology. And the type is pretty important. I believe it's the same thing as cloaking, the field manipulation, but I'm not too sure. We didn't just go past it. Yeah, that's shields. Um, some more things in here. Detection is, I believe, yes, further down past these guys. There we go, detection array. It's only 7,000 research, and I was wrong. It is the computing tech category. So if you want to get this a little bit quicker, you need a leader with this type of expertise. And there's other ways to boost detection, like this guy, the um, dark matter cloaking field, but that's quite a bit more expensive in terms of research, and it requires the field manipulation thing, same as the cloaking technology. It looks like a lot of the things that have to do with those technologies or fall inside of the physics research, and it'll be like computing or field manipulation, and maybe every once in a while you see something with particles. Like this one is a star-based building that gives you just a little bit more detection, but not a lot more detection. I think you actually get more out of letting your science officers assist with detection of cloaking. If you have some level of cloaking, I think you can tell your scientists to come into the starbase and start doing the boosting +2. Um, but when I was trying to do that on star bases that didn't have it, it wasn't like letting me do that. It needs to happen on something that already has some level of detection, I believe. Right now, this guy's up to level 4. It can detect up to level 4 cloaking, I believe, or below. But once they get to tier 5, um, this detection is no longer able to see those flying ships or things that are cloaked. I think you can cloak more than just that. Your basic military ships, like you can cloak like transports and science ships and other fun things. Which brings me to our next tip. You can use your science ships with cloaking to go explore places that otherwise would be off limits. Like for example, this science ship, um, it can go through these systems, even though I have closed borders with this nation, because it's cloaked. If I compare it to one of my other science ships that isn't cloaked, the system's off limits. Uh, but this guy, he can get in there. So that's pretty useful if you wanted to try and survey something like this system and then grab that system before the AI can get there. That's one really, really cool thing that you can use cloaking to do. Um, Pretty short tip, but I think pretty useful in general. It's been it's been, I think, something that the whole closed border situation is one of the things that's been frustrating for people for a long time, and the ability to just kind of like circumvent that mechanic without removing it, I think is really a fun thing that I'm glad that the people over at Stellaris were willing to consider. Um, Next, we have cloaked science ships will have another trick up their sleeve. They can perform reconnaissance on colonized systems. So, like this guy over here, if I wanted to try and collect intel, I could use this mission to do that. It's pretty different than the previous ways of collecting intelligence. Usually, you would get that from going into espionage and building up your spy network like this. I believe when they join the galactic community, the intel jumps up to a certain level, but then it can deteriorate or go up from there based on if you have spies in there or not. So I like that that's in there. It's just maybe not super impactful. The numbers, depending on how much you get out of it, could be really good or like not worth sending a science ship over for. It's one of those situations where I think depending on the galaxy and who you're playing with, it can be a lot better or worse. I have a feeling it might be better in multiplayer, being able to collect intelligence like that. There's certain situations where that can be pretty useful. Like if you're trying to start a rebellion in the Galactic Imperium, you need to get intelligence, and that can be kind of hard to come by. My next tip is to try and get the new psionic cloaking. It's got some pretty interesting interactions that you don't find in the regular cloaking systems. Um, I think that if you combine it with the psionic shields and maybe one other thing, then the shields don't drop down when you go into cloaking. Usually you lose your shields, but if you go into this guy right here, you'll see that most shields will just disappear. You'll have minus 100% shield strength when cloaked, but if it's got psionic barriers or psionic shields equipped on them, then the shields don't disappear when you go into cloaking. So it's actually quite powerful and will allow you to um, actually use some shields when you're come out of cloaking and engage something. It'll allow you to do more ambush type tactics rather than just scouting. Like this isn't much. I don't think it's any more useful than regular old cloaking um, for scouting, other than maybe it gets that extra bit of cloaking strength. It's got +2 cloaking strength, and I believe this one's just +1. Yeah, that one's just +1. Um, so yeah, keep that in mind. This is for military purposes, and it's pretty different than the other rules. It's also found underneath the society tree because a lot of psionic stuff is found underneath society. A lot of the cloaking stuff is found underneath physics, but if you want to combine them, I think that there's a lot of potential for synergy there, and I can't wait to see more. I think there's probably some other things in the details that I missed about just psionics being better at cloaking, because I don't know, thematically it makes a lot of sense to me. Um, Next we have that it's worth keeping in mind that when you do put cloaking on military ships, that the one with the lowest level of cloaking will affect how the entire fleet is seen. So if you've got a battleship with 1 in cloaking and a bunch of corvettes with 4 in cloaking, you want to probably take that battleship out of the same fleet as the corvette so that they don't get revealed at the same time. I was having some issues when I was trying to actually apply my cloaking to my military vessels for whatever reason. When I go in here and I try to save it, and it does have enough power, that it says that the design has more than a maximum amount of phase Psi-Phase field generators, and if I use this one, it won't let me use that component either. And I'm kind of curious if anybody has any thoughts as to why that is happening. It might be something that is just like a UI glitch, or I might be doing something silly. So I'd love to hear what people's thoughts are on that subject. The next tip I wanted to talk about is that you should be trying to go for these new Archeo-tech weapons if you're not tech rushing. I think if you're tech rushing, they don't actually compete very well with the late tier components, like this tier 5 armor and this dark matter deflectors. But when you compare it to like the tier 4 and tier 3 armors, I think you can get these architect components a lot earlier, and they've got pretty decent um, base hit points, as well as some interesting interactions like giving you shield hardening, or I think this is the this one gives you some shield points as well as just armor. And yeah, I think that it's neat that we also have these weapons that allow you to kind of just get access to that without necessarily get access to some pretty good weapons without necessarily going for a tech rushing empire. And then there's some other things that you can get to make these even better than they would be, like the what's it called? Archeo-tech Ascension perk gives you plus 33% extra damage, and I think it unlocks some special interactions with the buildings, which, from what I understand, are actually quite a bit better than these weapons. In general, the weapons kind of drop off, but when you look at the new Precursor buildings and the other like architecture, Archeo-tech style buildings, they're very, very powerful. We just started researching this one right here, the Voltanium reality computer, which gives you a lot of research as well as a science director job. And it's not just one that you can build on one planet. You can build this across your entire empire. Every planet can take one of these special precursor buildings, which means getting precursors is just that much better and that much more important. So the physics research is also just better. It's more than just the jobs, but the real main nice takeaway from this one is that you get +2 income on all physics researchers for the researcher jobs. That won't apply to the science director jobs, I believe, but it's more like your typical one. But yeah, if you've got some research worlds with this something that looks like this, just getting that +2 extra research on each one of these individual guys adds up to quite a lot of extra research in the long run. And next we have my tip about the new Colossus weapon type. There's this thing called the Devolving Beam. So once you research your Colossus, you can pick a beam, and the new Devolving Beam, I think, has some interesting interactions with other mechanics in the game, like the Alien Zoo. I think that that one's been completely reworked. But before we jump into that, let's take a look at the Colossus itself. So if you wanted to, you can use this. It's like most other um, super weapons. This is going to have a charge time and a firing time, and if you get there before it finishes firing, then you save the planet. But typically these are very very scary if you actually see them and you weren't ready for them, because they can just completely get rid of your defenses. I think the Devolving Beam is interesting in that it makes the species worse and capable of being used in um, other systems like the alien zoo. I think we were just about to get an alien zoo up on my pre-sapient planet, which I can find using this menu. Yes, the pre-sapients are here, and right now they are providing +1 amenities, I believe, and that may be coming from the fact that yes, they've been put into the category of conserved fauna, but you can also have I think something that you do with the species of people that have been recently devolved that them treated like conserved fauna. You get entertainer jobs as well as zookeepers. It looks like one of each for this level of the alien zoo. And yeah, I think that is interesting that they're changing things around like that. The pre-sapients, now if you uplift them, they don't provide you with nearly as much influence for, so keeping an alien zoo for them could actually be worth it, or could be a good way to get amenities if your empire is lacking that. And yeah, I think that that's where we'll wrap up this video. Thanks for joining me. Until next time, have a good one.